Okay, here's some locals coming across the Jardine directly behind us. As you can see, they skirted around the spring in the middle there, and it probably also helped them get across there because they had probably twice as much power as me. But anyway, we're across the river safely, went to Bamaker to restock, have a bit of a look around, waited for an old Range Rover that had broken down, get out the way, just another small creek crossing, and headed up towards Punsan Bay. Headed in there and set up camp. And everywhere up there are empty 44s, fuel drums left over from the war. A rather large cemetery. From there we went into Seisha. Thought we'd try our hand at trying to catch something off the wharf. There were lots of people fishing off the wharf. But nobody seemed to be doing very well. Managed to catch some bait, but that was about it. The young Aboriginal kids were jumping off the wharf into the water. Very quick to tell us that the white fellas couldn't do it because the sharks and crocs would get them, but they'd leave the young Aboriginal fellas alone. Apparently. That was the ferry across to Thursday Island, which we would get on in a couple of days. Now we're heading across to Thursday Island after a couple of days rest at Punsan Bay. Quite interesting over there. Bought a few typical touristy type souvenirs. Had a drink at the pub. Watched all the rusted out old cars driving around. as you can see, the camera was really starting to play up. And the next day we decided we'll hightail it up to the very tip of Cape York. And there used to be an old Ansett or TAA resort there, and of course there's a big bus full of people that had come up the PDR. So you go all that way, we walk over the hill out towards the tip to get the obligatory picture of the sign, and there's 100 people there. Unbelievable. So then we decided, let's go across to the eastern side at Somerset and do what I believe now is called the Five Beaches Run, back down south along the eastern side of the Cape, which is really quite lovely. The Jardine family had set up shop there back in the 1800s apparently. And I think there was a pearl farm set up across the way as well. There's quite a bit of indigenous art on the cliff face. This was heading off down towards the beaches around the headlands. Past all the termite mounds. And not paying attention, looking at the scenery, cruising up a bit of a sandy hill. I thought, oh well, good time to try out this new Fandangle snatch strap. And it worked fine. Yes, and the next day we packed up and went out to Moody Heads and spent the night there. Even found ourselves a little shack to live in. Well, I got to do a bit more fishing while I was there. I only managed to catch a couple of sharks. But it was a lovely place to spend our last evening up there before we started to head south the next day. Well, that was the plan, to head towards Weipa the next morning. But there was a bit of a spanner in the works, as in this. The passenger side shocky had torn completely out of the chassis. So it was back into Seisha and have it welded up. I guess that's what full road pressures on endless corrugations will do. So while that was happening, we thought we'd go back down to the wharf and have a fish. And of course the barge was there loading up, so that put pay to that idea. One of the old radar stations from the war. Yes, and as we were crossing this little log bridge, which was rather rotten, there were lots of little splinters sticking up, which I managed to stake a tyre on. Wasn't a good couple of days, mechanically, but anyway. You've got to expect these sort of things. So back down to the Jardine, and people had walked a bit further up the river and put a line of sticks in for you to follow to avoid all the little springs that were in the middle. Which made life somewhat easier. And another terrible filming job going across the river. Bit of stabilisation back in those days wouldn't have gone astray. But hey, it was 92 and it was an old camera. Yes, and in the week that we'd been up the top, the Jardine had probably dropped nearly a foot, which was good. Brad and Anna had no problems getting across. And now it was time to go back and play with all the creek crossings again. Telegraph poles. The telly track was named after, obviously, or the reason it was actually put in. This was probably the trickiest section of all the creek crossings because there was very little room for error on either side. The creek itself was easy enough, it was just the entry and exit. Stopped off for a bit of a dip and to wash some dust off. All into Elliot Falls. Elliot Falls or Fruitbat Falls? One or the other. So on the way back down, we couldn't continue on without at least looking at Gunshot. So there were about 3 main tracks, all of which I had absolutely no chance of doing. So we took the chicken track. Which is fine. Especially with no low range. But even so, I still didn't give it quite enough berries. Try that again. Yes, we ended up with another couple joining convoy for a while. Yes, we were all heading to the same place. As you come down the Cape, there was a little track that cut across the Cape and took you over to Weipa. Big hole right on the exit there. As you can see by the water up over the bonnet. This is going across the bridge coming into Weipa. This is where I found out the car was starting to run rather crook. Set up camp in the caravan park at Weipa. I started going through trying to find out what was going on. Ended up having to drain the diesel. There was some sort of fungus growing in the tank because of the humidity. Got some cooked diesel from Bamaga, I think. And then joy to the world, I ended up being ill with some fungus growing in me. Ended up with tropical ear. That was fun, putting peroxide into my ear. Anyway, that all got cured. I thought I'd fix the car, but it still gave me grief all the way home. But it got us there. So while we were in Weipa, there was a big bike race on over the weekend called the Croc Run. That was a bit of fun. Out there on the piss with a shitload of people. Watching a few guys really come a cropper in the mud. Most of them were staying at the caravan park at Weipa. So on the Saturday night it was party central. This is really what got me going watching this. As soon as we got back I bought another bike. As you do. Well, we had a 60-acre property, so I had place to ride. Isn't it amazing? When we wanted to film things we were doing, the camera was a pain in the ass. Filming the bikes, 90% of the time, worked perfectly. Go figure. guess a few of them started to wise up, make their own track. Back at the caravan park, all the boys decided they'd have a bit of a show off, a wheelie competition down the beach. We did something most people don't do. The car got put into a shipping container, that one right there, and put onto the supply barge that runs down the inside of the Gulf. Said goodbye to Brad and Hannah. Had 2 nights in our cabins on the supply barge, which avoided all those damn corrugations on the PDR, which I was quite happy about. So off we went out of Weipa. And the guys on the boat stuck a couple of lures out the back of the barge. Not that the barge was going to slow down, but they had a couple of big chunks of chain on them to try and keep them down into the water, and they were tied to, well, what was technically clothesline. That's the chain bouncing in front of there, and hooked up straight away to a couple of big queenies. And as we got outside the harbour and started travelling down the inside of the Gulf, we hit a patch of Spanish mackerel. Quite large ones, as a matter of fact. And the guys on the boat, yeah, I was just about buggered pulling them all in. The guys on the boat cut up all the Spanish mackerel for us, bagged them up, froze them away. We had a big dual compartment fridge. Well, not fridge, esky. And when we got off the barge down at Karumba, packed them all into the esky. And decided to make tracks towards Mount Isa, where a relative was living, and we just filled these freezer full of Spanish mackerel because we had no way of getting them back home. And he said after about 6 months he was sick to death of them. Had Spanish mackerel every way he could. Yeah, so the first morning we woke up and we were at Aurukun where they were dropping off supplies. Cruised down the inside of the Gulf towards Karumba. There was a big storm came over during the night, which made it quite rough and quite interesting. Enjoyable all the same. Corumba in '92 from the water, obviously. Everybody camping on the beach. Quite a few brolgas flying around up there too. So we fueled up at Corumba and headed towards Normanton. Across the Norman River. And into the Purple Pub. From there we headed off and spent the night at Lawn Hill National Park. By Gregory Downs. So I went for a walk up along the ridge and around to have a swim where the waterfall is, where the calcium's built up in the river and created, well, like a lock, really. Small dam. So you've got an upper and a lower level of the river to due to the calcium dam that's built up there over the years. It was a great place to have a swim, knowing there was only freshwater crocs in there. No salties to worry about. Stopped in, had a look at Delves Grove on the way out, and headed down towards Rivers Lee. Which was a rather lovely little spot in the middle of a very dry, desolate outback Queensland. Yes, the poor camera was on its last legs here. From Rivers Lee we headed down the dirt road through the bull dust to refuel at Camberwell, then head into Mount Isa to drop off all the frozen fish before it defrosted. Yes, a lot of the road was pretty chopped up and very bull dusty. That was the road into Camberwell at the time. And once we got there, we were back on bitumen. As I said, from here we headed from Camberwell to Mount Isa to drop off the fish, and it was around about here that the camera finally turned its toes up. So the rest of the return journey back to the coast and down through Deepwater National Park and everything we didn't get to film, but at least we salvaged something. Anyway, that's it. Thanks for watching.